When we talk about the conspirators, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure out who they are, right? When it comes to all of these things that continue to be imposed on us and all of the
Yeah.
censorship. And, it's like, it feels like because it's such, because it's happening and it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem random, right? It seems like there
Mhm.
is an agenda. And we all
Yeah.
get censored whenever we're speaking up against a particular thing. And it seems like there's this agenda. So then of course it causes us to think, well, then there's this, some cabal sitting in some smoky room planning and
Mhm.
plotting, and then they go and give directives. I know that's how it feels, but I don't know if that's actually what's happening. I mean, it's less likely that that's actually happening, but instead something else, some other phenomenon has happened, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because it's like, who's at the top that's making this decision that, hey, Don, you're not allowed to question the Mexican American
Right.
War. You're not allowed to
Right.
question the
Right.
Civil
Exactly.
War. How dare you? Who's at
Mhm.
the top, like making that decision? I don't know if there is a person at the top. It's almost like
Yeah.
this brain, like a mass psychosis, like a consent that is just, because I can imagine the park service person that says, you know what, we will allow you to exhume this body. And then of course the boss
Mm.
comes around and is like, what in the world were you thinking? How could you allow
Mhm.
this? Right? That,
Mhm.
well, then
Mhm.
who told the boss to say, how can you allow this? And it's just this
Yeah.
chain of almost just like I would think, I'm having a difficult time explaining, but I almost think it's some sort of it's psychological. I don't know if there's really anybody at the top telling people, you're not allowed to question this. You're not allowed to, these are the things that are off limits. It's more of just like a mass psychosis, like a mass formation psychosis type phenomenon where people think that this is wrong. So therefore, I have to crack down on this, even though there's nobody really telling them to. I mean, I don't know. What do
Well,
you think about that? Like, where is this coming from?
well, yeah, that's a good question, but I think that, there are indications, I mean, again, I think there's a group at the top. I mean, so a lot of people have called them the Illuminati. We know the Illuminati, for instance, crimes and cover-ups. I showed the Illuminati definitely existed, and both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson talked about them. So this is not some imaginary thing. And are they still there? Are they the reason? And so many people want to blame the Jews or the Freemasons. I mean, there's always a group that they pick out. And I don't know that, but there's something there. And I use the quote from James Forrestal, who was Harry Truman's Secretary of Defense, who they pushed out of a window at Bethesda Naval Hospital and claimed he jumped. He was the first critic of Israel, by the way. And he was good friends with Joe McCarthy, who this book, American Memory Hole, I think I helped restore his reputation because he's been treated very unfairly. But he told McCarthy at one point, he said, McCarthy, if there wasn't this giant grand conspiracy, once in a while they'd make a mistake in our favor. And I use that quote all the time that if there was any randomness to this at all, things wouldn't always happen to benefit the same powerful interest. And
Hmm.
they always do. Something always happens. Once in a while they'd say no to war, for instance, but they never do. And if they do, they're like JFK and they get killed for saying no to
Hmm.
war over and over again. He's the last one that said no to war. But I think there are indications when you look at the yearly Bilderberg meetings. For a long time they tried to claim that this is imaginary, this crazy conspiracy theorists thinking that. Eventually, then you started having some of the conspiracy theorists sneaking into the Bilderberg conferences, and they realized, okay, well, we have to admit it exists. Now, most of the time, there's some high-profile national media figures that come, but they're sworn to not report about it. And keep in mind, Kim, you're talking about there were royalty attend these things all over the world. The chairman of the CEO of Fiat and it's General Motors, all these incredible corporate leaders, senators, kind of always a few chosen ones, media, sometimes celebrities. Angelina Jolie is great for being at these things for some reason as an actress. You tell me why she's there. I don't know, but and what do they discuss? I mean, do they get together and just what I don't know, talk about fantasy football? I don't what would they talk about, and why wouldn't that be news? These are the same media figures that will break their neck to go photograph some celebrity's wedding, but they won't talk about it. That same thing with Bohemian Grove. Alex Jones very famously, and until he snuck in, it's, "Oh, what are you talking about? There's all these people are worshiping a giant stone owl. You're crazy." Well, he went in and filmed the giant stone owl. It's real. And they are worshiping it. He filmed the entire ceremony. It's an occult ceremony, and they're worshiping this giant owl. You tell me why they're. And do you know Walter Cronkite? the trusted voice. He was the voice of the owl at those ceremonies for decades. Nobody knows that, but these are not conspiracy theories. So I don't know why they would be doing that. And no women were ever allowed. No females, not even females couldn't even work there. And I didn't hear any feminists complain about that. And again, these are movie stars were there, lots of people were there. And so these, at least those two things are kind of yearly confabs where they get together. I don't know that they sit there and discuss, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to launch
Hmm.
COVID PSYOP and this we're going to, I don't think they do that. But when you mentioned, I don't think they need meetings for the most part, because when you go through, the same guy that you're talking about that, well, the guy that recently has come out, I think he's the dean of Liberty of Berkeley Law School, who's come out and said basically the Constitution is outlived its usefulness. The Bill of Rights goes too far and that kind of thing. And this is a dean of Berkeley Law School. Well, every kid that's gone through his class, and there's so many professors like that, are all those kids that go through that, they're completely brainwashed. I mean, they're indoctrinated into that, so they don't have to be told that, hey, this is a conspiracy, and they know how, and that's why people that are obviously not part of any conspiracy, they would respond to me a particular way, and I'm familiar with it. They're going to respond with an argument towards a normalcy bias, an appeal to authority, and they learn that there. They don't have to be involved in. Now, I think there are still people at the top that maybe in some kind of, maybe at the top levels of Freemasonry. I don't know where these things happen, but there's like a super insider club. But for the most part, they don't need to, because every as you said, like if somebody said you can't. If somebody wants to exhume a body or something, somebody cancels them. I don't think anybody has to tell them that. They
Right.
just know that they've heard their superiors say it, and maybe they gave them some ridiculous reason why. And again, because of their indoctrination, they accept. And it's amazing some of the rationales that they will come up with these things. But I mean, I believe me, I taught I had to stop doing it. I was so disillusioned. Amazingly enough, my county adult education program let me teach a course on the JFK assassination for a while, and then I taught a course on Oliver Stone's JFK. It was great time. I just got to show the movie and stop it and talk. But in every one of the classes, there was at least one lone nutter. And I'm very confident, especially in my knowledge of the JFK assassination. I'm pretty sorry. I can pretty much convince anybody what a conspiracy was, but I couldn't convince these people. I mean, I had my PowerPoint presentation set up, and I'm showing, and I began to realize, wow, I can't get through there. They've been totally indoctrinated. It doesn't matter what evidence I show them.
Right.
Some professor told them this and that, and that's something that more people are willing to believe is a conspiracy. But you could say that about 9/11 or anything else, and um, so that's what people like me run up against. But yeah, I don't pretend to know whether I don't think there's secret conspiratorial meetings, and I don't think the media has to be like, for instance, in something like the Trump shooting. I mean, that's already been I mean, look what a life span that had. I wrote, it was probably 3 weeks after it, I started writing about, hey, how come nobody's talking about this anymore? Even Trump's nobody's talking about it. It was an
Hmm.
assassination attempt. Supposedly you have a bunch of people saying it didn't happen, that it was fake, but nobody's talking about it. The Secret Service undeniably stood down. They didn't do anything. They didn't follow any protocol. They had witnesses saying, "Hey, there's a guy walking with a rifle and he's scaling a building," and they did nothing. So how does that not warrant a major investigation? So you tell me, does that mean that everybody? I don't think everybody was instructed. Somehow they just know, okay, this is for whatever it was, we're not supposed to look at it, because I've been studying these things for so long, and I keep some kind of incident or some kind of historical narrative where they told the truth. Where if I scratch the surface, I'm not going to see what a lie it was, and I haven't found one yet. I literally have not found one thing they told the truth about. You do a little bit of investigation and say, "Oh, geez, they lied about that too." And I wish I could find one, but I haven't been able to.
I think, as I'm sitting here just kind of going through processing this through my mind, I think what happens is, because you're right. The issue is, and why everybody would say, "Oh, you're just a big conspiracy theorist," right? Is because people aren't given like a note, people that are working at the park service or anywhere aren't giving a note saying you're not allowed to do this, or this. Like we're not given a memorandum that tells us the things that are conspiracy theories, but people just seem to inherently know what they're not allowed. The indoctrination of the average person, of the average business or the average media company. There's just an indoctrination that is just naturally there, and people just seem to intuitively and instinctively know what they can and cannot question. And that is what's so odd about it. That's why I'm wondering, what is it that causes that phenomenon where people would just instinctively know? And the answer now, the people that are on the side of the mainstream history and mainstream news, their answer would be that's because there's no conspiracy. You're the conspiracy theorist. You're a nut. Everybody else is sane. And the reason why they're agreeing with one another is because they're sane and they're agreeing with sanity. And you're the
Right.
insane one. So you're the only one who's thinking of these other things, and everybody else knows that all of these various things that everybody knows, and you just are the only one that doesn't. So that would be their response. But I think what
Yeah.
really does happen is I think that there is, and I see this even inside of the independent media space. I think any circle, when there's a circle of like-minded people, they start making friends with one another. They don't want to upset each other. They don't want to lose those connections.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose those friendships. I even just had a couple of independent journalists get mad at me just today and yesterday, and I maybe have completely ruined those connections and those relationships. But my take on it is always, I being if you're a truthful journalist, you will have no friends. That is your friends should be outside of the circle of power and outside the circle of other journalists, because you're just going to lose your friends. And that, to me, I'm totally fine with. I don't care. I think that's the job that I signed up for. But I think what happens, and so I'm seeing this phenomenon happen in a small scale, just in my own life, of my own world that I operate in. And with also same thing, I've upset a lot of people that were inside of the anti-mandate, questioning the COVID narrative. That group, we don't agree on other issues. They've now alienated me because of that, or they, whatever, right? So there is a tendency, and I see then people that maybe don't agree with certain things, but they just remain silent. And they remain silent because they don't want to ruin those friendships. They don't want to ruin those connections, right? They want to stay in the circle. So I'm kind of wondering if at the top echelons, well, we know at the top echelons of society, the top 0.0001% of the wealthy, those that actually run these big corporations, that run the billionaire class, right? They do all know each other. They party together. They're in the same inner circle, and they don't want to upset each other, right? And they also, because they're hanging out together, and we see these phenomenons all the time. We see it, especially, it's pointed out a lot, I think, in Hollywood. Hollywood people are weird. And it's like, why are they all weird? All of them, what is it about this group? Well, it's because they're hanging out together. That's their social circle. So they're talking to each other, they're learning from each other, they're mimicking each other. That's their social circle. So the billionaires also, so that's why they all kind of tend to do the same sort of things, and it's all kind of weird. Same thing with the top 0.1% class. They're all hanging out together, and I think that they, by just hanging out together, and they're the ones who have all the power, they then kind of create, even without having the meetings, even in the dark smoky rooms, they don't have to have the cabal, right? They could just, at their parties, there's a manufactured consensus that forms in these inner circles of what's appropriate, what isn't, because, oh, if I take this stance, that's against my best friend who owns Raytheon, right? Or or like whatever. So I don't want to be. So they tend to help each other and prop each other up, and that means they create a consensus of what is and isn't appropriate, what can and cannot be said. And since they're the top echelon, the people underneath don't want to upset them. They want to maintain their access. They want to maintain their lifestyles, and so on. And it goes down the list like this, on and on and on it goes. So it doesn't even need to be the dark, smoky meeting and the plotting and the planning and the
No,
cabal, right? It just needs to be a party.
no.
It just needs to be
Yeah,
galas. It needs to be swanky
yeah,
events, and they get together
right.
and they decide this is what's good for me and what's good for my circle of friends. And I don't want to upset my friends, and I love my friends. And so this is what's good for all of us. And so people are not allowed to, that's kind of what I'm thinking where this stems from.
Yeah, well, certainly
That's
in Hollywood, it's just it's they're virtue signaling, and they've established that to get along out there. And obviously, these are people that wanted fame, and they're narcissistic to begin with. If if you're gonna
Yeah.
if you become some kind of a movie star, you're going to be narcissistic, obviously.
Well, and
And
also, by the
people,
way, and I live in LA, I'll tell you, they're also all very, very, incredibly insecure. I mean,
yes,
the
yes, they're
insecurity is terrible within that group. No matter how big of a, I dated
yeah.
back when I was single, I dated A-listers, I'll tell you, and I've never met a more insecure man in my life I
Hmm.
mean, it's just
Yeah, no,
unbelievably.
yeah, I can see that. I interviewed the people that were famous at one time. I talked to a lot of them when I was writing on Borrowed Fame, my book about showbiz. But I got to know some of them. But there's a group think, and Hollywood
Yeah,
represents it better than anything I've ever seen. And so, for
right.
instance, in something like Trump, whatever when Trump came along, and I've got my own theories about him, but when his personalities created this hatred on so many people, obviously it really festered in Hollywood. And once a few of the more outspoken ones jumped on there, then it was kind of like the Me Too thing for a while. It's like everybody was jumping on Me Too, Me Too, and so they're doing that for Trump because they know they're going to get virtue signaling points, and maybe
Hmm.
they'll get invited to the parties that they want to go to. But if you come out against Trump, or, if
Yeah,
you come out on the other side, then obviously you're not going to be invited to the parties anymore. And again, and it's like they're just reacting viscerally, the people that because this is their mindset. It's like nobody told them. I think they just responded and said, "I've got my own theories about Trump," but they responded to Trump's personality, which I think that's what was planned, that they would have this reaction. And but the group thing out there is unbelievable. I mean,
yeah,
I was canceled by so many of them that were friendly to me at first. So because even though I'm a Trump agnostic, but people think that I support him because I hate pretty much all the people on the woke left now, and
right.
so they naturally think, well, you must like Trump. Well, no, I've written critically about him too, but so a lot of them just canceled me. And John Wilkes Booth, great grand news, canceled me. I looked up and said, hey, she's not my friend anymore. And it was either Trump or COVID. I'm sure one of the two, but so you lose a lot of people when you put yourself out there. But I know that, and you talked about difference of opinion. I'm a civil libertarian. I'm one of the few ones left. So I respect. I'm a free speech purist. So I never argue with people about their opinions. I usually just kind of they say you're stupid, you're wrong. Say well I try. Thanks for reading or something like that, and that
Hmm.
diffuses the argument because I'm not gonna you have your opinion. I can't like I said when I taught those JFK assassination classes. And I realized, wow, this impressive PowerPoint presentation, I can't convert this young guy who wasn't anywhere near being born at the time of the JFK assassination. So you just shrug and say, well, you can't convince everybody,
Yeah.
and that's what I've had to accept because it's hard because you think if you feel as strongly about some of these things as I do, and you realize I just can't convince I'm my own family. I'm a pariah. I mean I hear from people every day all around the world that love my stuff and it's great, but nobody that knows me in real life. No,
Yeah.
if they're reading or listening to me, they're not admitting it. So it's a strange phenomenon, but you can't, you can't. Sometimes you just have to accept that.
So I think it's the groupthink for sure. I think it's the groupthink. And I think that once you get to the top echelons of power and when they form their own groupthink, and we see this, when they go to Davos and they do and the WEF, and there's these groupthink events where they get together and they manufacture this consensus, at the meetings. They say, well, this is what we think. And then everybody in the room realizes, okay, I guess this is what we're thinking because we have to. So
Mhm.
there are times when I think they actually manufacture that consensus, but otherwise the groupthink. But I think that groupthink is the issue. And it's the groupthink amongst the power players and the leaders. And the question then is now I think it's okay. Like when it comes to Trump, for example, a lot of people in Hollywood, Silicon Valley, if you were to support Donald Trump, you were a pariah. But now this time around, there's like enough of them that are breaking from the fold and enough of them now that are breaking towards Donald Trump. Like, for example, David Sachs, who's been vocally supportive, Elon Musk, right, vocally supportive of Donald
Mhm, of
Trump.
course.
So I
Mhm.
think once you get enough of them, you could kind of hit this tipping point where then it becomes okay to now, for Silicon Valley and Hollywood people to now support Trump. Before it was a death sentence for their careers and they were considered a pariah, but now it's okay because enough other power players have come out and said, yeah, I support the guy. I like the guy, right? So that clearly is the way to, which is really awful. I mean, it's awful that the way to break through to get it would be you have to find other power players who are going to
Mhm.
then side with you on whatever this thing is. That might work when it comes to Trump or an election, but that doesn't seem to work when it comes to the war machine, right? It doesn't seem to work with certain things just yet. Um, so
No.
I guess that's a big question for us to ponder is how do we break through that group think to where the type of history you're writing about in your books isn't considered, fringe, conspiratorial, you're, an insane person. Like we just need to get enough people that are inside the inner circle, I guess, who then say, yeah, we should be questioning all these things. But what are the chances they're going to do that when it disrupts the power and they're in power and nobody really wants to give up their position?
Well, and that's the thing. I understand people who that I'm writing basically against the system. My book Survival of the Richest was an indictment of the rigged economy and what I call the unfair system. So I
Mhm.
understand that anybody who's done really well under the system doesn't have any reason to protest
Right.
it.
Hey guys, this was just a clip of a longer show. Catch the full show by going to KimIversonShow.com. It is free. It airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You could go back now and watch this full interview. I highly recommend it. Again, go to KimIversonShow.com. Thank you so much for watching.